So we're in the middle of a writers and actors strike right now, meaning that currently content creators should avoid talking about any sort of film and TV project from struck companies. And unfortunately, at the moment, that's basically all of them. So I figured if I can't talk about successful TV and film writers, might as well dunk on the failed ones who turn to conservative media grifts.
Wet ass P word. Make that pullout game weak.
Ben Shapiro is a serious but really shouldn't be taken seriously political pundit who basically likes to talk about things he doesn't fully understand in ways that make him sound smart, but to anyone who actually does know what they're talking about, he looks really sharking stupid. Ben Shapiro decided to show this off by fighting against the girl boss feminist Sarah Brady as she shared text messages last week exposing the controlling and emotionally abusive nature of her relationship with actor Jonah Hill. And baby Ben Shapiro, being the big culture war maniac that he is, just had to have an opinion on it. Which, by the way, I feel like a lot of people on the internet don't know this, but you don't have to have an opinion on every situation. Like seriously, it's so easy to just not have an opinion on things. Especially when it comes to abuse. If you're not educated on it, you don't have to have an opinion as to what constitutes abuse. There's this fun phrase that you can say when people ask you things. It's no comment. You should try it sometime, Ben. But before we get into the video, let me just add a trigger warning for discussions of emotional abuse, the cycle of violence, and mentions of sexual assault. If you are unable to hear about those things, please come back when you're in a healthier mindset. Now, with that out of the way, let's lay some groundwork and discuss what is the cycle of violence. The cycle of violence is a model used to describe the complexities of living within an abusive relationship. It's meant to be like a roadmap for abuse, describing where it all started and how we got to the point of staying in a long-term abusive relationship. The cycle of violence is not exclusive to romantic or sexual relationships, and it can happen in any sort of dynamic. It can happen with parents, friendships, even work relationships. It can happen to anyone at any time. No one is immune from the cycle of violence. And it's also important to note the cycle of violence doesn't just start off with abusive jerks immediately coming up to a person and beating them. It starts more subtly than that, with love bombing. Love bombing is the stage of showering a person with love, affection, and attention. Maybe they buy you a gift or two here or there. Maybe they tell you how they've never felt this way before about anyone and you're so special. Maybe they want to move in with you after only 2 weeks because they're just so certain that you're the one. They start showering you with money as a show of affection, a monetary representation of their love. Then we feel the tension building. Something is off and you can't quite tell what. Maybe your partner is having a lot of bad days at work lately. Maybe they're just in a really weird headspace. This is usually when they start to isolate you. They tell you that your friends are not a good influence and that they're not on a good life path. This is usually when your partner starts lashing out at you, little by little. Maybe they don't like the way your guy friend looked at you a little too long the last time you spent time together. Or maybe you responded in an overly friendly way when someone hit on you at a bar. Somehow, it's always your fault for spending time around people who are clearly not in your best interest. Then, after days or weeks of walking on eggshells, there comes the acute explosion. This is where the abuse portion tends to happen. Physical, psychological, emotional, sexual, or even financial. Abuse comes in many forms, but often is justified by the abuser as some form of punishment for the victim's behavior. I didn't have to do this. You made me do it.
And look at what you've done to me.
What I did.
Look what you made me do. After the acute explosion, the abuser will make apologies.
You gotta forgive me. Tell me to forgive me.
I'm so sorry for the way I acted. I promise we can fix this. I promise I'll go to therapy. And then, if the victim does decide to stay, the love bombing starts the cycle all over again. Only this time, they love bomb you a little less, and the abuse gets a little worse. This is how the cycle operates, and many people are trapped in it for years to come. So now that we've established what the cycle of abuse looks like, let's get into the very very educated Mr. Shapiro, who I'm sure will look at this fairly and in good faith.
An ex-girlfriend of his is now coming out of the woodwork to accuse him of brutality and vicious evil. Why? Because he texted her some stuff that, is kind of not, amazing, but also not that bad.
Okay, well, that's not what Sarah said, Ben. When Sarah released these text messages onto her Instagram, she never once accused him of being brutal or violent. She stated that the treatment that she had received from him was narcissistic, misogynistic, and abusive, which is not the same as being brutal or violent. This is one of the biggest problems that we as a society have when discussing abusive relationships. We talk about abuse as though all abuse is physically violent, when, as I said before, there are multiple different kinds of abuse. There's emotional abuse, which is often seen through belittling, gaslighting, and actually driving another person into a mental breakdown.
I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong.
There's financial abuse, which is where the abuser keeps and maintains all financial control over their partner.
It's like that. Exactly why you'll never again have access to my money.
Verbal abuse is when someone continuously puts you down, telling you that you're nothing, calling you names, screaming at you over and over and over again.
Every day I wake up and I hope you're dead. Dead like if I can guarantee Henry would be okay. I'd hope you get an illness and then get hit by a car and die.
There's also even something known as cultural abuse, where your partner uses your cultural identity to control or punish you, like constantly threatening to out someone who's LGBTQ, or maybe forcing a person to eat things that go against their religious identity, something that, as two Jews, Ben Shapiro and I should both understand how violating that would be without being a violent act, because not all abuse is violence.
She says he wrote that if she, quote, needed surfing with men, boundaryless, inappropriate relationships with men, to model, to post pictures of yourself in a bathing suit, to post sexual pictures, friendships with women who are in unstable places, and from your wild recent past beyond getting a lunch or coffee or something respectful, I'm not the right partner for you. I have a question. Am I supposed to be, deeply offended by this?
No, Ben, we're not supposed to be offended by this, but we should be very worried. This is what the kids call a red flag. What we're seeing here is the isolation part of the cycle of violence, the tension building. Sarah's job as a surf instructor is to teach people how to surf, and sometimes those people are men. He's asking her to limit her interactions with customers in order to satisfy his own insecurity. Here, let me explain this to you in a way that you'll understand. Say your wife told you that she didn't want you talking to any right-wing grifters. Sure, you sometimes debate with leftists, so you'll still be able to get work. But working with people like Jordan Peterson, Candace Owens, or basically anyone on your team, that would severely impact your ability to do your job and get paid for it. That would be an unfair and controlling boundary, wouldn't it?
If you don't like it, he literally says, I might not be the right partner for you.
Let me explain something to you. When you've been in the cycle of violence and they say things like, I might not be the right person for you, that's not a choice. It's the illusion of a choice.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland.
You can make the choice to leave, but if you do, the abuse doesn't just stop there. In fact, statistically speaking, the most dangerous time for a survivor is when they make the attempt to leave the relationship, because that's when the abuse increases. If she were to leave the relationship at this point, he would, repeatedly tell her that the entire reason that they didn't work out is all because of her behavior and not at all because he was insecure. That would never happen. Right, Ben? By the way, if you want a perfect example of emotional abuse, part of emotional abuse is treating somebody like a child and talking to them like they're a child and punishing them like one. Like in this fucking message!
What he means is really the next one, right? Boundaryless, inappropriate relationships with men. I mean, I think it would be very hard to date a woman who had boundaryless, inappropriate relationships with men.
Another thing that insecure abusers will do is accuse their partners of having boundaryless, inappropriate relationships with somebody of the opposite sex. Oftentimes, this jealousy is targeted at men that women have in their lives because, and this may come as a shocker to some Some people don't actually believe that men and women can be friends without sexual or romantic relationships.
Like a man capable of sustaining a platonic friendship with an attractive female coworker. We're entirely hypothetical.
Granted, we don't know what her relationships are like with the men in her life, but given that he's already been shown to be irritated just by her taking on male clients, who's to say that any of the relationships with her male friends are inappropriate at all? This is, my friends, what we call gaslighting.
You gaslighted me! You're a fucking villain!
You see, her boundaries that she may have with male friends, which she likely does, as we all have certain boundaries with all friends, are not considered real boundaries by Jonah because he was not the one to lay them. So instead, he's going to tell her that she doesn't have any boundaries with them at all, and make her feel like she is somehow being inappropriate. That, my friends, is gaslighting.
When he says posting pictures of yourself in a bathing suit, you know, again, she's a surfer, so I imagine that a lot of the pictures on her Instagram are of her in a bathing suit, but there is, you know, kind of an inherent difference between you surfing in a bathing suit or you modeling on the beach in a bathing suit. Not quite the same thing.
Okay, what's really funny about this portion is that in the beginning parts of their relationship and while they were flirting, he really enjoyed those pictures a lot, but suddenly they're inappropriate once she's dating him. Also, she's a professional surfer and model. It's literally her job to post bikini pictures. Jonah getting mad at her for that? Ben, that's like your wife asking you to not misquote statistics in order to make a false point. You've got to make your money somehow.
It seems like nobody should have, you know, friendships with people who are in truly unstable places. It helps bring them down.
What seems to be happening here, Ben, is that both you and Jonah seem to be misunderstanding what a boundary is. You see, wanting a person who is conservative and doesn't have too many friendships of the opposite sex, that's a preference. It's not a preference I'm comfortable with, but that's my boundary I set for myself. And the way that I maintain that boundary is by setting it and stating, okay, if you're a really jealous person, then you're not the right partner for me, and I'm going to leave. You see, a boundary is about what I will accept for myself, and if their behavior is not something I can accept for myself, I leave, because it's my boundary, not theirs.
I don't actually understand what the boundaries of victimization are if this stuff qualifies. Like, why are internal negotiations between partners when it comes to your love life now subject to public negotiation? If you don't like it, you can leave.
The reason you don't understand it, Ben, is because you're uneducated about how the cycle of abuse works. If you were educated on it, you wouldn't ask, why didn't she just leave? She wouldn't just leave because she's in the cycle of abuse. The cycle of abuse makes it extremely difficult for survivors to leave. In fact, it takes an average of 7 attempts to leave for a survivor before the leaving becomes permanent. And it's especially difficult to leave when your partner has significantly more economic and social power than you do.
He wasn't in a position of superior power over her.
He's a 2-time Oscar nominee, Ben. She's a surf instructor.
Yeah, I don't understand even what the argument is for her posting this stuff in the first place.
You don't need to understand why she's doing this, Ben. Part of a survivor's journey in recovering from abuse is sharing their story. It doesn't matter if you think it's the wrong time for her. That's between her and her therapist. And you know, Ben, contrary to what you may believe, you don't have to have an opinion about everything. I don't know what person told you that your every thought must be shared, but I assure you they are not all diamonds. Because if you think somehow that survivors of abuse are met with praise and adoration when they speak out against violence or assault, you are very, very wrong.
Presumably she thinks that this is going to make her a girl boss, that being a girl boss, it is amazing how being a girl boss shifted from what it was, say, 30 years ago to what it is now.
Ah, yes. The term girl boss definitely has evolved from what it was 30 years ago. Mostly because the term didn't exist 30 years ago. It was coined in 2014, Ben. Although, okay, let's be real. After COVID, everything feels like 30 years ago. But seriously, I'm not even 30 yet, and you're acting like this term is older than I am.
Whining and moaning about how your boyfriend sent you texts you didn't like 4 years ago.
Ben, these texts happened a year and a half ago. You're acting like this was a pre-COVID breakup she's been holding on to for a millennium. It's been not even 2 years, my dude. It hasn't been that long. And even if it had been that long, you get no say in when a survivor shares their journey or how. It doesn't matter if it's been 10 days, 10 years, or 50 years. When a survivor shares their story, it's none of your business why. Part of the reason that some people come out years later is because it can take years to get over the fear of their abuser. And when they do come out about it, it empowers other victims to come forward. And yes, sharing things like this does help other people realize that this is abuse, because emotional abuse is one of the most covert forms of domestic violence out there. Part of my training as a counselor advocate for survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence was learning what abuse and sexual assault looks like. And in every single training, we had both men and women realize from this training that they were also survivors of domestic violence or sexual assault. We're not taught this stuff in schools due to people like you constantly attempting to restrict education on healthy relationships, boundaries, and consent. And to say that any survivor comes forward for claps and cheers is just a drastic misunderstanding as to what the reaction is. A year and a half ago, right around the time Sarah was going through this with Jonah, I was date raped. After 7 months of healing, I finally felt brave enough to share my story. And while yes, there were people who were supporting me, there was also a large amount of people who told me that I deserved to be sexually assaulted for going on a date with him in the first place. I was told that when he forced himself on me, it wasn't actually sexual assault because I didn't fight back, because I was scared and let it happen. I still get people to this day telling me that I deserved to be raped for whatever it is that they disagree with me on. And the reaction I got, that's not rare. So many other survivors have had the same thing happen to them when they shared their stories after experiencing sexual assault or domestic violence, which is why one of the most powerful things that we say to survivors as advocates is, I believe you. And in your constant attempt to fight this culture war, you consistently forget that there are things that you don't know and just shouldn't talk about. Despite what your toxic masculinity says, it is okay to not know things. And this is just one more thing that you can add to your ever-growing list of bad takes, because this whole response is just one bad take that reeks of ignorance. Hey there, this was once again a video that came with a very heavy topic and a trigger warning. If you find yourself triggered, even though you thought you were able to handle it, that's okay. It happens to the best of us. Please do not hesitate to reach out and text HOME to 741-741, or be sure to contact the Peace Over Violence Rape and Battery Hotline at 213-626-3393. Both of these are lines with trained crisis counselors who will be there to listen, validate, and help talk you through this. Please know that you do not have to go through anything alone. Somebody is always there for you. If you did like and appreciate this video, please feel free to leave a like and a comment. Also, share it. That helps the algorithm a lot. I know that this is a little bit different than my usual content, but with the writer's strike and the actor's strike going on, I felt it was important for me to take a small break from talking about any sort of mainstream film and television content in order to support the actors and writers who are just asking for a livable wage and not to be replaced by AI. We're living in a fucking Black Mirror episode. If there is content that you would like me to review, especially content that is like books or comics or anything like that, please feel free to give a comment. And if you can, feel free to subscribe to my Patreon. There are multiple tiers that you can subscribe to, some as low as $5 a month and some as much as, I think the largest one I have is for like $500. And it's that I will say one nice thing about Autism Speaks. And no one has bought that yet, so I've never had to say anything nice about Autism Speaks. Take that, capitalism! I don't think that was the burn I thought it was. But yeah, for as low as $5 a month, you can interact with me, maybe call me a smart hoe because I have glasses now, so I can no longer be a dumb hoe. Take that, me! And if you cannot subscribe to my Patreon at this time, that's okay. I'm a broke bitch too. Liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel are all free. Also, leaving a nice comment. You know, it never costs anything to be kind. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about next, whether it's books for a little bit until the strike is over, or short films, indie films, things like that, or maybe even video games. I love talking about video games. I love video games. Until then, I will see you in the next video, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye!